What if Adam was never the first? What if the Garden of Eden wasn't the beginning of our story but the final chapter of another world that ended in fire and shadow? Genesis opens like a melody. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But in the very next heartbeat the tone collapses. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness covered the face of the deep. This is not the sound of creation. This is the echo of destruction. In the ancient Hebrew, it reads tohu vabohu, a phrase so rare, it only appears when God has unleashed judgment so complete nothing recognizable remains. Isaiah used it for lands left in burning ruin. Jeremiah used it for cities erased from history. So what was wiped away before the first man was ever shaped from the dust? Who ruled a world so corrupt God himself buried it beneath chaos? The Bible doesn't tell the story, it leaves us with a silence. And in that silence, between the first two verses of Genesis, is the grave of something ancient. Something intelligent. Something God destroyed but never explained. And if we dare to look into that silence we may find a truth that rewrites all of history. Between Genesis 1 verse 1 and 1:2 there is a pause. A gap of untold length. No verses. No details. Just silence, the kind that hides something too dangerous to name. This is what scholars call the gap theory, the belief that an entire age existed before Adam and ended in a judgment so absolute, all that remained was darkness over the deep. Ancient Jewish tradition whispers that God created multiple worlds before ours and destroyed each one when corruption took hold. Creation, destruction again and again until he made this world and called it good. But why did those worlds fall? Some believe the answer lies in the oldest rebellion of all, the fall of Lucifer. Not a serpent in a garden but a radiant prince of heaven who waged war against the throne of God. And when he was cast down, his fury struck the very world he ruled, a kingdom shattered into chaos. Could the first Eden, the garden Lucifer once walked in, have bloomed before Adam ever existed? If so, the paradise we know was not the first. It was the replacement. And the ruins of that first Eden may still be buried beneath our feet. If the first Eden truly came before Adam, then who lived there? The book of Job gives us a glimpse, a scene so ancient it takes place before the first human heartbeat. When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Job 38 verse 7. These ben Elohim, sons of God, in the original Hebrew were not myths, not symbols. They were radiant, immortal beings. Heaven's stewards, entrusted with earth before man was ever formed from the dust. They were the watchers. At first, they ruled as guardians, keeping the balance, protecting creation. But in time guardianship turned into something darker. Desire replaced duty. Obsession overpowered obedience. The ancient book of Enoch tells how 200 of these watchers made a pact. Led by a chief named Semyaza, they descended upon the summit of Mount Hermon, a place whose name means cursed. There, they crossed the boundary between the divine and the human. They took the daughters of men as wives and shared forbidden knowledge never meant for mortal hands. From that union came something unnatural. Not angel. Not man. But giants, the Nephilim. Beings of enormous size and strength but also enormous corruption. Predators in flesh. An infection in the human blueprint itself. They were not an accident. They were a calculated rebellion. A plan to rewrite humanity until no image of God remained untouched. And they very nearly succeeded. The Nephilim were not legends. Their name means the fallen ones born of a rebellion so deep it reached into the DNA of mankind. They were giants in stature, but even greater in violence. Genesis says the earth was filled with violence, but the Hebrew word shamaz means more than chaos. It's lawlessness, brutality, and corruption at every level. This was no random evil. It was a strategy. A slow, deliberate rewriting of the human blueprint until nothing pure remained. But one man stood out. Noah. Scripture says he was tamim, the same word used for a spotless lamb prepared for sacrifice. It didn't just mean he was morally upright. It meant his bloodline was uncorrupted, untouched by Nephilim influence. He was the last untainted vessel through which God could preserve his image on the earth. And so, God made the most terrifying decision in history. I will wipe mankind from the face of the earth. Genesis 6 verse 7. The flood wasn't only judgment, it was surgery. A total reset of creation's genetic code. The ark wasn't just a boat, it was a mobile garden, carrying every pure seed, every uncorrupted creature, through the waters of wrath to start again. And when the waters swallowed the old world, the Nephilim were gone. Or so it seemed. Because Genesis 6 verse 4 leaves us with one chilling whisper. And also afterward. And also afterward. 3 words that shatter the illusion of a clean slate. The waters receded, the ark came to rest, but traces of the old corruption survived. The Nephilim returned not as scattered monsters, but as kings, warlords, and living gods. Their shadows stretch across history. Megalithic stones, each weighing hundreds of tons, lifted and set with impossible precision. Cities aligned perfectly to the stars. Myths from every continent telling of skyborn rulers and giants who taught men the secrets of metal, war, and sorcery. This was the forbidden knowledge of the Watchers smuggled through the flood, hidden in bloodlines, whispered in temples. The names changed, gods, titans, demigods. But the agenda did not. And somewhere, beyond the reach of mortal eyes, perhaps Eden itself remained not destroyed, but sealed. A paradise hidden, waiting, guarded from the unholy, and untouched since the day man was cast out. But before we can search for it, we must first face the one who ruled before Adam and brought the first Eden to ruin. Before Adam took his first breath, before the first Eden bloomed, another ruler walked its paths. Isaiah 14 calls him Lucifer, son of the morning. Ezekiel 28 paints him as the seal of perfection, full of wisdom, perfect in beauty, and anointed guardian cherub. This was no serpent in the dirt, this was a prince of heaven. He stood in the heavenly Eden, the throne space of God himself, clothed in radiant stones, breathing the air of glory. But pride took root. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. Isaiah 14 verse 14. Worship was no longer enough, he wanted the throne. War broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought the dragon, and the dragon was hurled down not to a void, but to earth. Not as a conqueror but as an exile. Earth was his prison, not his prize. And what did he find here? A kingdom he once ruled shattered. Genesis 1:2's formless, void wasteland may be the scar of his fall, the ruins of a dominion he corrupted and lost. So when God planted Adam in Eden, Lucifer was not a stranger trespassing. He was a dethroned king, watching another take the place he once claimed. And every whisper to Eve, every lie to Adam, was not just temptation. It was revenge. It was a plan to reclaim, through mankind, what heaven had stripped from him. Lucifer's throne was gone, but the war was not over. Into that shattered battlefield, God formed a new ruler, not from the glory of heaven, but from the dust of a cursed earth. Adam's creation was no accident. This was strategy. He was pure, uncorrupted, and spirit-filled, a living image of God, placed in the very ground that had once bowed to a fallen prince. Adam was given more than a garden. He was given dominion to restore what had been ruined, to guard the border between heaven's order and the echoes of Lucifer's chaos. Every tree, every river, every breath was part of a mission, a divine counterstrike. But Adam wasn't just tending plants. He was holding a line. And when he failed, when the serpent's word sank deeper than God's, the war did not end. It simply shifted, waiting for another champion. The first man had fallen. Now the battlefield waited for the last Adam. Adam's failure let the curse in. But where the first man fell, another came to stand. Christ, the last Adam, stepped onto the same battlefield, but he did not yield. Every temptation Adam failed, he faced and overcame. Every wound Adam caused, he came to heal. On Calvary, the gate to Eden swung open again. The sword that once blocked the way to the tree of life now pierced the Son of God, and through his blood, the way was restored. This was no small victory. It wasn't just about saving souls, it was cosmic. He reclaimed creation itself from the grip of the one who ruined the first Eden. And when he rose, he became the firstborn of a new creation, a people not defined by the dust of the curse, but by the Spirit of life. The invitation now is the same for every one of us. Leave the ruins and step back toward the garden. The war did not end at the cross. It began before Adam, and it still rages now. Ephesians 6 warns us, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against rulers, against authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness. The enemy is not a face you can see. It is ancient, intelligent, and it remembers Eden. Christ's victory was final, the curse was broken. But your role is not passive. You are called to enforce that victory, to carry restoration into a world still echoing with ruin. Every choice, every word, every act of faith pushes the war toward its final end. You are not here by accident. You were born into a story older than time, and the author is still writing through you. So choose restoration over ruins. Step toward the life you were created for. You are not too late. The garden still waits.